Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop. We're a podcast journalist,
a filmmaker,
and a cultural critic burst pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
I have a question for the both of you. Who is the fictional character, television or movies, that you have spent more time with than any other person?
Okay, for me, I couldn't pick a fictional character. And my answer is all the Real Housewives of Orange County, Beverly Hills, New York, Dallas.
Dallas.
I loved Dallas. My panties are sick of you, she said. No, it was my panty liner is tired of this. Yeah. And then of course, like Salt Lake. So my answer is just the Real Housewives. Like, they're my friends.
Okay.
I have a real gap in knowledge for the housewives. I don't know what you're talking about.
We feel sorry for you.
Yes,
Kristal and I feel bad for you.
Okay. Probably the people I've spent the most time with actually are podcasters in my ears. But if I had to pick a fictional character, it's probably Harry Potter, because I hear those books. They read me to sleep every night, and I just go from one book to the next in order. And they were all purchased many years ago, and that's all I'll say about that. What about you, Sullivan?
Jack McCoy. It is not close. There is nobody near Jack McCoy, played by Sam Waterston, who's the assistant district attorney, who made his appearance on the 5th season of NBC's Law and Order. Set in New York City, the series follows two separate yet equally important groups: the police, who investigate crime, and the district attorneys, who prosecute the offenders. The show and the franchise it spawned has gone on to be a cornerstone of American television across 2 centuries. Law & Order and its first spin-off, Law & Order Special Victims Unit, are the #1 and #2 longest-running live-action scripted series in American history. I got curious. If you watched one episode of the Law & Order franchise every day, how long would it take you to finish? Do you have a guess?
I'm going to say 4 years.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I was going to say like 20 years.
Well, I would say, to the extent this is like The Price is Right, or it's as close as you can get without going over, you're both actually over. But Haley, you are very close.
Oh.
There are more than 1,400 episodes across the franchises, which would take you 3 years, 10 months, and as of the time of this recording, 24 days. And the time of this recording, not only in terms of when we're recording, but also Law and Order is still on TV. So we're also adding episodes every single week. But today we are going all the way back to season 17, which was in 2007, where we open on a famous soap opera star, Sophia Archer, who's played by guest star Jennifer Beals, and she has taken her kids out for ice cream.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
That was amazing.
I'm guessing we can't license like the real to kind of.
I bet we could license the dun though.
I don't know.
No, I think we can. You can find that online. You can find the dun dun.
Maybe.
You could find it, but do we have permission for it? I don't think so.
I don't know.
This was the first Law and Order episode I'd watched in a very long time, because I usually watch SVU. That's the one I default to. Yeah.
Same.
Don't take that personally.
No, I grant you SV. Like I'm an originalist. I get it.
I thought you were gonna say it was your first episode of Law and Order ever.
No,
And
we
I
wouldn't be
was
friends.
like,
We wouldn't be
"What?"
friends. We wouldn't be friends.
No, I used to watch it all the time. I watched
too.
reruns. I've seen probably hundreds of the
Yeah.
episodes for sure.
It's
I
my
don't
sleep show.
recall-
It's my comfort show.
I don't recall ever watching this episode before.
Okay. So do you want to open us up, Haley?
Okay, so we're at the ice cream shop. It's clear that this person is famous, and the husband is outside with their newly adopted black baby, and the baby's got like a blanket covering his face because there's no photos happening of this baby. And the ice cream scoop girl is like, recognizes her, wants to see the baby. So we get this like backstory of like, this is a newly adopted baby and no one has seen photos. It's like this secret, thing. And then there's a gunshot outside. It's pretty wild, and the husband is killed. I was not expecting that.
Because it's Law and Order, and there's typically a murder within the first few minutes.
And the baby is still alive in
The
his
baby's
body
okay.
carrier.
Yes.
Is that what it's called? A body carrier? What's that called? A baby carrier?
Baby carrier.
Can't remember.
It's been so long, Kristal,
been
since we had
so
babies.
long. I
And we had to
know.
buy all the special equipment, whatever was new at the time. I don't know. Baby
No,
carrier.
I literally held my babies in my left arm and cooked entire meals with my right arm. I'm not a kid. I didn't have a baby carrier from what I recall. Maybe if we traveled, but like day-to-day life, no, which is stupid. I probably screwed my shoulders up or something.
This is a total aside. Baby wrapping was real big when I had my first baby. And so I remember getting this, like, I don't know, it had to be 20-foot long piece of fabric that was specifically like a baby wrap. And to figure out how to put it on, you had to specially not like one time. And it was gone. It was gone. Okay, so anyway, husband is dead, baby survives.
And what the two of you, I'm guessing, with all your baby wrapping and baby holding and juggling, did not have a team of folks at your disposal, including the nannies to raise your children, as is the case with the very famous soap opera actress Sophia Archer in this episode of Law and Order. And so the detectives arrive on the scene to begin investigating this murder of her husband. And we learn very, very quickly that this adoption, which actually the baby is actually from Africa, that this adoption had some controversy around it. And there is a question about whether or not the adoption was actually for publicity, and whether or not the adoption was a copycat, and whether she was copycatting, which I thought was hilarious.
So when you say copycatting, you're meaning Angelina Jolie and
Madonna.
who's the other one?
Madonna and Angelina Jolie, who are named in the episode, right? The detectives actually say, is this like a Madonna, Angelina Jolie thing? Is this a copycat? So I went back because Madonna and Angelina Jolie are adoptive mothers. Both have adopted from Africa. In 2005, Angelina adopted Zahara from Ethiopia. And in 2006, Madonna adopted David from Malawi. Closely followed by Mercy and Astir and Stella as well. So she actually has 4 children adopted from Africa.
Wow.
Though at the time of this episode, she had 2 adopted from Africa. And Law and Order, for folks that may not be diehards the way that I am.
And then you can't be friends with Sullivan, apparently.
Then we're not
if
going to be
you're
friends, but
Yeah.
that's okay. But I mean, I'm sure you're a nice person. We're just not going to have much to talk about. That one of the things the show is known for is what is called ripped from the headlines. So part of what the show was envisioned and built upon is this idea that it takes real things happening in the news and dramatizes it. And to be really clear, it will start with something that really happened, but then it will absolutely not simply fictionalize the event, but really go in a totally different direction as well. And in fact, as we go through this episode, this is not the telling of Angelina Jolie or Madonna. However, the backstory really is. And Haley, you're making a face. How much of this did you remember in watching the episode? Like, as far as the real underlying story.
So they give a fictionalized country that this baby is adopted from.
Mamuno.
Okay. And what I was remembering was there was controversy, I believe, around both women for shortcutting all the regular adoption laws for intercountry adoption, which may be you might have to live as a resident in the country for a certain period of time. It could be 6 months, could be a year. They must have tried every effort to find living family first and all those things, right? Like most countries don't want their citizens to go out and be adopted out. I mean, it's not good practice. And yet international adoptions occur. And so to see celebrities jump to the head of the line, skip out on any of these rules, government officials just signing off on things that if you or I were to try and do these things, we would never. And you have to wonder how much money is involved and how, right? Like who is there bribery involved? Like all of those things added up to the side eye happening for these international adoptions, which seemed highly unethical. Of course, in hindsight, looking back, I would, of course not, but it was more normal people who aren't adoption critical experts like the three of us would look on this and say something nefarious may have happened here.
As you were talking, I was just going to say, did Madonna spend 4 years in Africa?
What are you talking about?
She did not.
She did not? Okay.
She did not, and it was one of the controversies specifically with respect to her adoption of her first adopted child, David, was the amount of time that she spent in the country that did not fulfill the requirement for Malawi. So that parallels. Sophia Archer spends 3 days in Mamuno, even though we are told the requirement to be able to adopt is a year. The other thing that is very resonant of real life is we are told that there's a health crisis in Mamuno. There is a horrific AIDS crisis in Mamuno, and there are AIDS orphans. Similarly, certainly in the early aughts, there was a severe AIDS crisis in Malawi as well, for which Madonna donated tremendous amounts of money to the country, which is the same with Sophia Archer in Law and Order. We know that she has donated millions of dollars to fund AIDS research or medical care and those kinds of things in Mamuno as well. So we see really early on this parallel with real life.
Speaking of real life, I didn't know that Mamuno was a made-up place. And going into this episode, I was so excited because I knew that Sullivan was going to do the research to tell me about Mamuno and adoptions. But now that's all gone out the window.
Well, Mamuno is a real, and now you're gonna have to edit this out because now I'm gonna have to look it up. It's either it's a community or it's a tribe. It's a real word. Mamuno is real. It is just not a country.
Okay.
And I can see Haley typing away over there, because I did look. I knew it was not a country, but I did look it up. But I think maybe a region and not a country. In the investigation, because they're continuing to try to figure out, who committed this murder, what was it about. We know that were protesters against the adoption of the baby, and we should say the baby's name is Christopher. So there was protests against the adoption of baby Christopher, and at one point there's a letter to the editor that talks about international adoption. And why would someone adopt internationally? And can we talk about that for a second? Because that jumped out to me, this question of why would someone adopt internationally? I don't remember if they said Brooklyn or the Bronx. I think they said go up to the Bronx.
Something, yeah.
And pick up a baby. Why would you adopt internationally? And Haley, you're making a face. Why would you adopt internationally?
Well, Sophia says... She mentions the baby's real father, and she says the only way his son would have a decent life. That's why the adoption happened. Why would you? I mean, to be seen as a humanitarian, the only way these children, just remember, I'm just being facetious here, these poor orphans in this backwards country in Africa that would just be destitute, and they can come to America where we are the only, top country in the, I'm not American, top country in the world, and you can have a better life. And it's just so upsetting. But yeah, if you adopt from a impoverished country, then you're a savior. And to see this adoption as good for publicity, how many covers were Madonna and Angelina Jolie on when they adopted? It was everywhere, and it absolutely increased the interest in other folks trying to save those babies.
You're dating us, Haley, because when we were growing up, what we would see was the covers of all the magazines as we were waiting in the grocery store lineup. That's what we kind of got bombarded with. We'd compare ourselves to. That's where we'd get that kind of information. Now, I mean, the kids are just scrolling. They can. That's their form of the grocery store lineup. And just on a side note, growing up, you and I both grew up in churches. Did you have families in your churches adopting kids from Africa? Because that was definitely a thing when I was growing up, and the words even have come out of my mouth that I would like to adopt a little black baby from Africa because of that influence. It seemed very altruistic.
My best friend growing up would say frequently that she wanted to adopt a little black baby. Exact words. She has not done so. Thank goodness. So again, I've mentioned before that I grew up in a very small conservative town, and it was sort of always 10 to 20 years behind the times because it was a Mennonite town. People, we had TV, we had cable. That was very unusual. And so there weren't any black babies adopted then, but certainly once I left for university, I heard, and it spread. It absolutely spread. I know that happens there now. Yeah.
Two things along these same lines. One is I mean, you both know that I am invested in this podcast and whatnot. And as we've talked about in other episodes, sometimes am forced to watch things I don't really want to watch, but, you know, I take one for the team and do it. I watched Madonna's documentary about her work in Malawi. It's called I Am Because We Are, from 2008. Yes.
Wow.
For the people. It is, I found it extremely hard to watch. It's 90 minutes of, it's propaganda. It's propaganda. It is visions through a white lens. You know, she produced it. It's her movie. So it is through, you know, her lens as an American woman, a very privileged American woman, of poverty, of illness, of gratuitous images of children in all states of impoverishment and despair. Arguably, most, if not completely, caused by colonial powers. Let's not forget that part. And while there is a plea for money and donations, there is also a not so subtle plea to adopt the children as well. David is in the film at the beginning, the son that she does adopt. The way it's played in the film is that she goes there just simply to make this movie, to bring awareness to the country, and falls in love with a boy and takes him home. There was some dispute about whether or not that's how it actually went down. I can understand how in 2008, again, these are earlier internet days, right? Like, you know, very early social media days, certainly not ubiquitous social media. This is before that. But I can understand how somebody in the United States or Canada would have seen this movie and it would have tugged at their heartstrings. I can understand that. But through a 2025 lens, it's not like the level of propaganda and white saviorism and American exceptionalism it's pretty gross and pretty hard to watch. But this film came out in 2008. So while, you know, these controversies are surrounding her about, you know, what she's doing as it relates to adoption. And so that's one piece. The other piece of international adoption, though, that we should touch on, and Haley, I want you to keep me honest in this piece also, is at the time, again, this is early aughts, we saw international adoption to a much greater degree than we see today. Today, many countries have stopped exporting children. The U.S. still continues to import children whenever it can, but the exporting countries many of them have since stopped doing so because they recognize trauma, yes, but oftentimes corruption and those kinds of things. But in, you know, early aughts, you had far more international adoption. And in fact, the international adoption was so big in the United States because the babies were more accessible. And so this was a supply and demand problem. The domestic supply steadily dwindled over time, and the demand only increased as adoption became more normalized. And so the babies have to come from somewhere. And so for hopeful adoptive parents in the U.S., there was a sense that it is easier to get a child from outside of the United States than it is to get one inside of the United States. Is that a fair statement, Haley?
Yes, it sometimes was more inexpensive as well, which is so wild to think about. I'm going back to this image you have of in the documentary of all these impoverished. I mean, we can see it. Like I can see the World Vision commercials, right?
Yeah.
With the kids with the babies with the flies on their faces and whatever. And isn't it interesting how people can see that, and instead of thinking, how do we support this community it's obviously so in need, we think, how can we take that baby and bring them back here to give them a better life? Like, what? Why is that the first instinct? It's so bizarre. And of course you said the American exceptionalism kind of thing, right? Like we're the best and this is the highest form of education and opportunities you could have would be living as an American. But like, what? Why would you? Like, the only other thing I see is this idea of like, then I'm a good person, and I'm really doing something then, versus sending resources so someone else can be a good person over there and help community build. But here, I can visibly be a good person and visibly be seen with this child of color and those kinds of things. Like, right? I don't know. I'm not making that up. I think I'm onto something.
No, I think so. And in fact, we see it in this episode of Law and Order, right? We see Sophia Archer repeatedly talk about what a good person she is. And so if we go back to our detectives who are still looking for the killer of her husband, and they're examining this adoption angle, and then they learn that actually Christopher's father had been reaching out, and because he wants to see his son. And they learn, in fact, that Sophia Archer has prevented him from making any contact whatsoever. And in fact, she's having a conversation with the detectives. The detectives sort of talk to her about this. And she says, she prevented any contact because she says, look, if we were going to be a family, we needed to be a family. And the detective said, but you cut him off, no contact at all, the opposite of your press statements. So she had apparently made press statements about the father being able to have access to his child.
There was no mention of the mother, I don't think, through the entire film or episode.
Yeah, did she pass away?
I'm assuming because they only mention that the father is alive. So I think that must mean that the mother died. Yeah. Or sorry, the baby's real father, to quote.
Yes. But this idea of the closing of an open adoption agreement.
It's a good faith agreement.
She says in this interview with the detective, I didn't want to hear from them again. This is really upsetting to me because, as noted in other episodes, I'm interviewing mothers right now who have relinquished babies, and they're open adoptions. This is what happens to some of them.
Yeah.
And you make all the promises until you have the thing that you wanted, and then you don't have to follow through because you've got what you wanted. You wanted the baby and you got it.
Mm-hmm. Whoever holds the baby holds the power.
Which, as one of those, as a former baby.
Wait, what?
Wait, I think I was a former baby too.
Were you? Kristal, were you?
Uh-huh.
But that feels,
was
I mean,
funny.
we've talked, I don't know if we talked about it on the pod necessarily, but I think we talk about it on our social lives. but babies as commodities, right? And so when you say that, Kristal, which is true, but then like you think about being the token of the token that represents like the power that's shifting between is dehumanizing. For sure. The detectives track down this father, Ephraim Mugai. They're talking to him. He essentially discloses that it was in fact him. There is a discussion about, and it's clear that there was he did not intend to shoot anyone. But he says he'll plead guilty. He just wants to see his son. He just wants to see him, and then he will plead guilty. And so now we have the ADA and the detectives going back to Sophia Archer saying, look, this guy will plead guilty. He'll go to prison. All he wants to do is see his son. Is that not too much to ask? And they're negotiating with her because she does not want to allow this to happen at all. She's very angry about it. And the ADA says, look, basically, like, just do this one thing. Like a jury, I understand he's admitted it, but a jury could find him not guilty. It's very clear he didn't intend to shoot anyone. There was actually a malfunction with the gun. That was very clear. Like, this was not intentional. He could come back. He could come off as sympathetic. And she says, how could he possibly come off as sympathetic? And the ADA kind of gets this look in her eyes, and she says, you refused him access to his child, who they will argue was adopted in an unorthodox way, to put it mildly. But what was so shocking to me about this part is you have Sophia Archer as this adoptive mother who is so focused on herself and what she wants. Like, she cannot, like, to her, like, she's literally done nothing wrong.
This is the entitlement, right? The ownership.
Yes. Because she does go on and on and on about how she saved him and, all of those kinds of things.
Okay, let's get to the scandalous part of this.
Talk about it, Kristal.
Okay, so the nanny, right? The assistant, kind of, she's half assistant, half nanny, played by Anna Chlumsky. Is that how you say her name? Chlumsky? Chumsley?
It's hard to say. The girl from My Girl.
Yes.
The actress from My Girl.
Yes.
And the Anna Delvey movie also. Wasn't she in the Anna Delvey movie too? She was the reporter in the Anna Delvey movie.
Oh, yes. She was good in that.
Yes. We love her.
So she brings in baby Christopher, and she's kind of covering his face a little bit. And the father says, please, I'd like to see his face. And so she pulls back the blanket, and the baby turns around and smiles and giggles at the dad. And then the dad has this look come over his face, and you're just like, what's happening? And then he's like, that's not my son. And it's not his son.
It's not his son.
Where is baby Christopher, and who the heck is this baby?
Who is this baby? Well, we soon learn the baby's mother is a woman named LaShonda Harris, who's in prison. And LaShonda Harris used to be Sophia Archer's assistant. She went to prison for a drug issue. The over-sentencing of women in drug cases in New York City is for a different podcast, not ours. But in any case, LaShonda Harris is in prison. And she says that she was approached by Sophia's assistant about how Sophia will raise your baby. And Sophia will give your baby a better life. Because LaShonda's baby was being raised by a relative who was not a multi-bajillionaire soap opera star. And so she thought she was going to give her baby a better life. So she agreed to let Sophia Archer adopt her baby.
The replacement baby.
The replacement baby.
So we learn that for the most part, the assistant was caring for baby Christopher. But she went to the store and Sophia was caring for him, and he managed to get his hands on some of her prescription medication, which then killed him. And when the assistant got back, she performed CPR, and basically Sophia didn't want the bad publicity, so she paid the assistant $500,000 to go dispose of Christopher's little infant body in the woods. Then they needed a baby. Hence why they went to the jail.
And I feel like we should talk for just a second about incarcerated moms as well. And in this particular storyline, she had the baby and there was family to care for the baby. It was only afterward that she was approached. But the separation of infants from their incarcerated mothers is also something that happens as a matter of course. Every jurisdiction is a little bit different. But in the U.S., the Adoption Safe Families Act says that there's an automatic severing of parental rights if a child's in foster care 15 of 22 months, which impacts in particular women that are incarcerated, even women that want to care for their children. And I know in New York anyway, there is always a constant push to speed up the severing of parental rights for women in prison. And again, it's because people like to adopt small babies, and so they want to sever women's parental rights sooner rather than later, because it will make the children more easily adoptable. And so that is it's a significant issue for all women. I think all women and all people should be concerned about this, and also for incarcerated women. And we'll drop in the show notes an interview. There's a new book out as well that talks about some of these issues, specifically talks about these issues as it relates to Indigenous women in Canada. But even if what that research is absolutely more broadly applicable outside of Canada and outside of Indigenous women as well. So we'll drop a link to that in the show notes too. But that's another issue that is significant as it relates to adoptees and birth mothers. This brings us to the trial scene, because we have Sophia Archer is now on trial for Christopher's death, and they ask her on the stand about her decision to adopt from Mamuno. And one of the questions is, did you do any research about Mamuno? And she said, I did months worth of research. And then she goes on to give a bunch of AIDS statistics, which I thought, like, that has, because Christopher didn't have AIDS or HIV. He was a healthy baby. So this idea that the research she did about adoption, ostensibly about adopting Christopher, was really about like the AIDS crisis in Mamuno, to me was about like justifying her white saviorism. It didn't have anything to do with the kid. Like she didn't actually talk anything about understanding the needs of a child you've taken from another country and culture and brought to another country and culture and raising that. Like, it was nothing about that. It was just about how horrible Africa is as a country.
And there's these comments too about, like, of course nannies raise the children. Like, I'm not going to raise a child. Like, I adopted and was not going to be the caregiver. And I thought, again, I think this is me being naive sometimes, but I was like, oh yeah, like, is this what a lot of big celebrities like, I know they have help, but surely they're still parenting sometimes. No, like, I don't know, like, literally, why adopt then? And it's truly for image. And there's this other, I wrote this quote down, babies as fashion. I don't remember who says that, but it's towards the very end. And I'm like, yeah, we've talked about before, like when we, way back when we did Sex in the City, like talking about Lily as a purse, like a fashion accessory to bring along to brunch, and it's hard to think that in some cases a celebrity adoption might be just this, like, for publicity.
I think there's many of us to some extent feel a societal pressure to do a thing or act a way. I know plenty of people that grew up in non-adoptees, that grew up in very affluent families, that spent the entirety of their childhood in boarding schools or with nannies or with, like, yeah. And I wonder, like, well, why? Like, I don't know. And I I'm not, again, as someone who chose not to have children, I don't want to make a judgment about somebody else's decision to have children and however they want to raise them. But yeah, I think people do things for all kinds of reasons that they may not stop to think about before they do them.
I love my children and I enjoy being around them. And certainly there can be annoying moments, but I miss them when I'm away and I want to hear about their day and I want to have influence on them and how they see the world. And I love seeing the world through their eyes. And there's none of that when someone else is raising your kid.
Yeah, I mean, like the trenches, right? Like the trenches of motherhood, of parenthood, when you've been up all night long with them and you wake up in the morning excited about bedtime, right? But you've still got to make them the 3 meals and you've got to give them all a bath and cut every little one of their toenails and fingernails and, like all of those things. And I mean, it stretched me as a human being. And I'm proud that I made it through those days because those days were so hard. And yeah, like to miss out on that would be sad. Like looking at that now, like that'd be really sad.
And for the adopted child, we're already talking about a maternal severance. This case, the mom was dead, and so the severance from the father. And then to have a rotating cast of strangers raise you. I mean, this is not what adoption was sold as. Mm-hmm. And
well, sold to who?
Yeah. I mean, even to the general public, like you think about for a parent who chooses to place their child, you're either selecting a single person to raise your child or a 2-parent household, and there's this promise of, this 2-parent family, they can do it better than you. They have all the assets and skills and all of these things. But like, you don't know if they're going to get divorced. You don't know if the dad's going to get shot in the street while they're just trying to get an ice cream. I mean, you don't know what could happen in the future.
I think also because, I am not defending Sophia Archer at all. Like, I don't want to be confused about what I'm doing. I think what I'm trying to do is universalize. I mean, the number of people, adopted people, that grow up with uber famous, uber rich people is, relatively small. And so all I'm doing is maybe like broadening out a little bit from like that particular adoptive mother figure. But I believe, based on my experience, that, and look, I was adopted to cure infertility. And so I believe there is a certain type of person who, upon learning they cannot have children, will readjust the vision they had for their lives. And there is another type of person who cannot and is unwilling to. And I think that type of person, I'm not saying they're not capable of love or affection or anything like that, but I think, in my experience, that whatever it is inside of them that makes them incapable of seeing life or contemplating life without a baby leads to some really questionable behavior over time. And whatever that mentality is, I don't think is different from the Sophia Archer archetype, who has all the money in the world and all the fame in the world and wants to tell the world she's done something good. Like, I think what's underneath all of that, I don't think is that dissimilar from a huge swath of adoptive parents who raise their children, who don't have the means, whether or not they would want to, like, to have nannies raise their kids and like all of that kind of stuff. So Sophia Archer winds up pleading guilty. She winds up pleading guilty. She winds up going to prison for essentially being negligent in the extreme. In the final discussion, though, between her and her lawyer, and Jack McCoy, I find it really interesting because she's like pleading her case about why she's a really good person. And she says things like, "It breaks my heart that a child whose life I was trying to save wound up in these awful circumstances," which is like a crazy, like, wound up in these awful, what are you talking about, wound up in these awful circumstances? But, she talks about children will live because of me. Like, what happened to Christopher is awful, but children will live because of me, because I gave all this money and I brought all this attention to Mamuno. Which, by the way, another thing that I watched is Madonna's documentary. There was a counter documentary that got made by a journalist out of the UK. And his counter documentary basically like goes to Malawi, asks all these questions about the money, and really sets up in real life this same push and pull that we see in this episode of Law and Order, which is, look, like a whole, like millions and millions of dollars got poured into the country because this celebrity did this thing. And so how do you weigh the good with the bad, and where's the line, and is it okay? And it's I think for listeners and viewers, like, I think people have to decide for themselves. It's very uncomfortable to think about. And to me, the biggest problem is people don't want to think about it. So they're just like, it's good, full stop.
And I just keep thinking about how many people lined up to adopt internationally from seeing their favorite celebrities adopt, and how that impacted those sending countries who may have had the same issue that the United States had, that Canada has, where are all these babies? We got to make some more. And what does that mean? It means child trafficking, where we're stealing babies and selling them for profit. I mean, truly.
Yeah. And I think we should, one more thing, I think before we give an award also is, we're talking about money, and, we assume that most people have really good intent. And when they see suffering on TV or in their communities, if they have the means, they want to help. And so and thank goodness people have that reaction. But we'll also drop in the show notes a link to SOS, Saving Our Sisters, which is a nationwide nonprofit that helps women who want to raise the children that they birth. And so we would encourage people, when they hear stories of moms who are in crisis and say, I don't have the means to raise this child, rather than saying, I'll raise it for you, or rather than giving, upwards at this point, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 that they raised on the GoFundMe to adopt the baby, that they give that money to Saving Our Sisters, or organizations like Saving Our Sisters that supports women raising their children and supports family preservation.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Kristal, would you like to give an award?
I would love to give an award. Today's award goes to Mr. Magai, the New York City policemen and women, as well as the prosecutory team of Law and Order. The Jack McCoy Award honors individuals who exemplify an unwavering commitment to justice, integrity, and moral courage. Inspired by the legacy of Jack McCoy and Sullivan Summer's love of him, this award recognizes those who pursue truth relentlessly, stand firm in the face of pressure, and place principle above convenience. Recipients of this award demonstrate fearless advocacy, ethical leadership, and a deep belief that the law exists to serve justice, not personal gain. Like its namesake, the Jack McCoy Award celebrates those willing to make difficult decisions, challenging complacency, and uphold accountability, even when the cost is high. This award is not merely for excellence, but for conviction.
I feel like you're just trying to suck up to Sullivan.
I'm so happy.
Can you see the smile on her face right now?
You guys, picture Sullivan with hard eyes the whole way through. Just like they're just boinging out of her head.
I love Jack McCoy so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, with that, Adoption Pop is podcaster Haley Radke,
Filmmaker Kristal Parke,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we relied on the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997. I Am Because We Are, written and produced by Madonna and Angela Becker. Madonna and Mercy, What Really Happened, reported by Jacques Peretti. Co-U for Vice, these adoptees were brought to the U.S. as babies. Now some fear they were stolen.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating in your podcast app, find and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
Thank you for tuning in to Adoption Pop.